just make it clear to people, you don't even have to have a question in your mind right now. But if you wish to hear the sound of your own voice, then you need to put your name there. There are 2 out of the 10 right now.
Right.
So you can ask a question on the back of somebody else's question. You can do what the hell you like, actually. But if you don't put your name there, you won't get called.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Many are called, but few are chosen.
Okay. So Andrew is in rare form this morning. So Loralee, if you want to start with your questions for Andrew, please unmute yourself and welcome.
Okay. Hi to everyone. Hi, Andrew.
Hi.
I remember you mentioned something that I was surprised about. You said in one of your talks that having been against a strong state for a long time, you were kind of leaning against that idea now. And I'm actually going the exact opposite way. Being French and culturally used to, having grown up in a social state, I tend to see that it's paralyzed by the financial world and the corporate world. And I wonder if I'm more and more interested in the anarchist thinking, but it would be like a new anarchy thinking for the new world, which would be a Senex anarchy and not an adolescent anarchy. So I was wondering what you thought about this idea, and also all the movements around Bakunin, and the communal governance and all these ideas of local powers. Of course, I see the limits of that with the law that has to be for everyone. The legislation is still a protection for all of us, but still, local power. What do you think of that?
Well, I used to agree with it. And of course, in many ways, I still do. But what I have realized during this viral episode is that we are the state.
Well, we're not anymore.
Pardon?
I don't think we are anymore. That's the problem.
Well, here's my point. The virus has shown how important government is. It was difficult for me to accept it, Mary-Laure. I didn't like this idea. But then I began to connect it up in my mind, and we must give Loralee a chance to come in too. I'm connecting it in my mind with what I feel about economic inequality, which I see as the bass drum of the music of the new politics. Everything, Black Lives Matter, disproportionate illness in certain communities, refugees, everything rests on economic inequality, which in most of the countries of the G8, all of them actually, is getting worse. And another point that you know very well, because we've talked about it, the impact of the virus has been unequal for females and males. Who is going to rectify it? Now, my mind began to change about the role of government and the role of the state when I started to get involved with Extinction Rebellion, XR, from now on. And you are involved too, I think, or at least sympathetic. And they have on their website their 3 demands. All of them, oh, you've moved. Okay, I was talking to your little thumbnail, but now you've moved somewhere. It doesn't matter. I'm talking to you and everybody else through you. That Extinction Rebellion's demands are actually demands on the government. And yet it is an anarchic organization, yet it is a direct action organization, and its direct action is to influence government. This is brilliant. Because what starts to join up is small scale, groupuscule, that means little groups, at work on whatever fascinates and interests them, but with a direct line of thinking to the government. And I'm impressed by this. And that's why I said, feels like 6 months ago, but probably it was 3 months ago, I said we have to reconsider and revalue the role of the state. May I say, though, that the state is not elections. The state is not party politics. The state is, in a way, an element within itself. There is a state, and there is a state that can do things. And I think that today's new radicalism, contra yesterday's radicalism, is to pressure the state. And I think I get my inspiration from a particularly wonderful economist called Maria Montelucci, and also from Extinction Rebellion. I don't know where you are on the screen, but I would like to pause, Marie-Laure, to see what you want to say back to me, and then we should switch to Loralee.
Okay, no, I got your point. I don't have any argument to.
Okay. Loralee?
I agree with all of it. I think, I think the pressure you're mentioning doesn't work. It's fantastic. I mean, I'm not downsizing it, you know, it has some efficiency, it has some power, but it's not enough.
Oh no, it has to be allied to political struggle. In the conversation on apocalypse and all the optimism that everybody was displaying about what a better world we were having during the pandemic, which I mocked, actually. There were no dolphins in the Grand Canal. And I'm not interested in New York psychoanalysts fleeing to their country retreats upstate or on the Maine coast. That's not it. But what I was trying to get at was that there will be a hell of a political scrap going on. And I think that the state can be influenced, but even if it isn't influenced, the point remains. Governments matter, state matters. I grew up in the welfare state in Britain after the war. So for me, it's not unusual to think of the state, but I think I'm thinking about it in a slightly new way. Loralee, please.
I'm going to abstain right now, Andrew, because I want to allow for conversation from everyone else. So I'll jump in when I feel I need to. I think this is a great conversation between you and Marie-Laure on this.
And my friend and colleague Marie-Laure, who is a Jungian analyst and extraordinarily learned in political psychology. So I'm a little bit nervous of you. Marie-Laure, do you have a second question? Because let's get you out of the way.
Yeah, but it's totally a different topic. It's about polyamorous relationships.
From the state to polyamory.
Yes.
How many events have you attended in the last lifetime where there is a smooth elision from the state to polyamory? And I can really speak to it, whatever your point is going to be. Now I should shut up and let you make your point.
Yeah, I just wanted to hear your reaction about my experience of it through my patients is that I notice it's often, I find it defensive. Polyamory, I find it defensive in terms of not getting involved emotionally too much. What would you say about this?
The problems with polyamory are usually said to be two. One is it's a boys' game. So for example, if you take the famous polyamorous triangle of Jung, Emma Jung, and Tony Wolff, it is wondered out loud whether in fact Jung got the most out of it, Tony Wolff second, and Emma Jung, his wife, third. However, if you look at what Emma Jung said in conversation as reported by contemporaries and in writing, she was very pleased with the polyamory. In part, one could be sarcastic about it because it took a madman off her hands. and allowed her to get on with being a mother. But the main accusation is that it's a game for men, and that the sexual revolution of the 60s was also a game for men. I partly agree with that, actually. The second problem with polyamory that is usually cited is that it leads to jealousy. It leads to people breaking even the rules that allowed you to break the rules. It's highly unreliable. How very different from monogamy, ha ha. Jealousy comes up in monogamy, and so too does the breaking of the rules, constantly. Polyamory is only different in our minds, in my view. Now, I want to link polyamory with the state, or with politics, really. Polyamory may be understood, and I hope this doesn't sound too professorial, it may be understood as an undermining, if not a direct attack on ownership. Ownership is, of course, the primary principle of capitalism. Engels wrote that the first class conflict is between man and woman. Actually, he wrote between husband and wife. Why? Because the husband is like the capitalist. He is the property owner. The wife is, so to speak, the worker, or even worse, actually, not even a member of the proletariat, but a member of the lumpen proletariat, which is even below the proletariat. And this is a very interesting thing to develop. Why is it interesting? It's interesting because it creates a connection between intimacy and politics. The connection is a two-way one. Certainly, what's happening politically in the society impacts on what's happening in personal relationships. But I don't think it's any more unrealistic than a million other ideas that are around at the moment to say what happens in intimate relationships changes the zeitgeist, changes the cultural conversation, and thereby has an influence on politics. And I would, but you haven't invited me to, make the same point in relation to promiscuity. The defining factor of Western monogamy is ownership. And that's why the women's movement objected to it so much. They saw it. They saw that. Now, wages for housework may be materialistic, maybe a little bit too literal. But when I first started my sort of political formation, and the women around, say, Spare Rib magazine in London were demonstrating for wages for housework, the penny dropped for me. There is a link between intimacy and politics, and it's one that absolutely fascinates me. And I have to say, it's two-way. Again, that the political atmosphere changes what goes on in the home. You can actually see this in the huge number of studies that are being produced about life under lockdown, life involving working from home, or life involving not being able to work from home, but having to go out and drive a bus, or run the underground, or sweep and clean the corridors of the hospitals. All of this speaks to the fact that what happens at home and what happens in the polis cannot easily be disconnected. So that's my answer. Loralee.
I'm just looking at this. So I think I would tend to lean. I understand where, is it Marie?
Yes.
Mary Law.
Mary Law is coming from relative to polyamory as a defensive, a resistance to intimacy. I think it's a much longer fascinating conversation relative to how are we defining intimacy? You know, what are we defining as intimacy? I think we're defining it we may be defining it differently. And Andrew, I also agree with where you're going in terms of, you know, and again, I think it's an incredible connection you're making relative to polyamory, politics, intimacy. I mean, here in the States, we're seeing a number of we thought diehard Republicans who are going to be voting Democratic, you know, so this idea of a one party, your one party for the rest of your life is transitioning as a result of what Trump is doing to this country. So you're starting to see, I think, some paradigmatic shifts in the political world. Is that translating into the home in any sort of?
No. That probably wouldn't translate.
No.
As well as what I'm
Right.
thinking about. What I'm saying is that what you do in bed and who you do it with in bed is immersed in a political reality as well as a personal reality. That's why the personal is political and the political is personal, blah, blah, blah. So whilst you're actually doing it in bed, you're not usually thinking about politics. It's later, when you're thinking about bed, that you might start to think about politics. And to thrust it in the direction of where the Sophia center's sort of center of gravity is, consider Lilith.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Lilith, it is said in the Midrash, could not tolerate the missionary position of sexual intercourse, because why should she be underneath when she and Adam were made from the same stuff,
Mm-hmm.
what we call dust? I think in America, sometimes it's even called dirt.
Mm-hmm.
But dirt here doesn't mean that. But anyway, Lilith is a very interesting case study of the relationship between, in this case, sexual intercourse and God's political disposition, so to speak.
But yeah, I mean, it's a great analogy and a metaphor, and it goes far beyond just intercourse. It's relative to power and positioning, and intimacy goes well beyond, as we all know, the bed and the bedroom. You know, in fact, it starts well before that.
Of course it does.
Speaking, not just
of course it does.
The act, but the power.
Sorry, I cut across you. I hope everybody heard. Sorry. Yeah, of course. Everything you say is right, but it mucks up the clear lines of what I'm trying to convey. There are a million different ways to define intimacy, and sexual intercourse is but one. But I think the point is best made by taking what for many is a very high level of intimacy, namely sexual relationships, and seeing how they operate in terms of politics. But obviously these criticisms are valid, but I'm sweeping them aside because I don't want to lose the big point, which is that there is something going on in the world of relationships that has been greatly accelerated by the virus. Maybe we should move on to Rachel.
We need to move. Yeah, we need to keep moving, but great conversation. So thank you, Marie. All right, we have Rachel Steele. Rachel, can you unmute your mic?
Hello.
Hi, Rachel. I haven't seen you for ages. Hi.
Hiya. Okay. Thank you very much for these enjoyable, interesting dialogues. I was especially fired over Andrew Samuel's political styles typology in relation to citizens as artists in political styles and artists' typographic styles of working. So an example of citizens as artists in sibling style could be the uses of the statement banners for Black Lives Matter demonstrations recently. So I follow an Instagram account whose sole pictures are banners used in Black Lives Matter protests. And I think that shows one aspect of the creativity that are brought to these protests. So is it okay if I show you a combine that I made an artwork on my screen?
Of course.
Yep.
Hold it quite close to the camera on the top. Oh, no, that's too close, a bit further away. And a little bit to, I suppose it's your left side.
Ah.
Yes.
Right,
well, I can see that very nicely. A little bit higher, a little bit higher. Perfect.
So it's a sign that I created from the Black Lives Matter demonstration that I went on. And when I brought it home, I stuck it onto a diptych that I painted, which is obviously like an abstract painting. So that had taken me quite a long time to make, and I enjoyed that. And also, then after I did that, I made a collage, a digital collage in a sort of similar style. So finally, I made a collage in response to all of your, well, particularly in response to the typology political styles thing. So it's a digital collage, and it's called Hope, Joy and Inspiration. So I'm an artist, so I wanted to respond in a way that sort of felt appropriate. Oh, and so to sum up, I think that these sessions made me conclude that there is a permeable membrane with energy flowing between artists and citizens and the political works that they create. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm pausing just to allow all that to sink in. It might be possible for Loralee to share what you've shown us with everybody. Is that possible at a later date?
You mean the video, the After the Rain? Oh, you mean Rachel's? You mean Rachel's?
Yes, Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We'll discuss it, Rachel. We'll see if we can manage it technically.
That'd be great.
Okay,
Rachel, thank you. I want to say thank you. And I mean, that's part of the, part of the priority of the Sophia Center. Thank you for bringing an artistic and a creative interpretation and understanding into this dialogue. I really appreciate that. And I think I agree with you completely relative to, I think, the power of the artists in these times. And throughout history, that often they've gone unrecognized. I think Eric Neumann's work in Art and the Creative Unconscious speaks to this. Jung talks about this. And I think it's a critical piece of moving things forward. So thank you.
Thanks.
Let me bulk that appreciation up with the theory, because that's where you began. For those of you who may not remember, or indeed didn't hear it, I produced a typology of political styles. And one of them, well, the first one was heroes, the second was siblings, the third was ostriches, and the fourth was good enough citizens. And Rachel has spoken to the second, siblings, which interestingly connects with Mary Law's point, I think, that when people rabbit on about the state, as I'm doing these days, maybe too much, they are not thinking about the sibling model. They're thinking more in terms of hero, state as hero, government as hero, and so on, or anti-hero, but that's where that particular piece of conversation this afternoon goes, heroes. This is siblings, and I think what you've picked up, and maybe it took an artist to actually make something solid and coherent from my idea, but what you've picked up on is that politics is self-expressive. Now, not all art is self-expressive, but we don't need to go into Royal College of Art levels of discussion. Just to say that broadly speaking, art is self-expressive, and politics is never usually regarded as self-expressive. It sometimes is regarded as autobiographical, like I began talking about my immigrant background as people were joining. Not everybody will have heard it, but that's different. Autobiographical or autoethnographic is really important, but it's not what we're talking about, is it, Rachel? We're talking about the artistic process, the artistic production process may be applied to politics so that your political ideas, engagements, actions hopes, inspirations, and fears, not joy, but fears, are in a sense akin to those of the artist at work. And that's why the phrase citizens as artists that you've brought in, Rachel, whose face has disappeared from my screen, that's why this phrase citizens as artists is really, really important. Now, I want to broaden this because I'm very worried that something is being lost in the acclamation of Biden and Harris in the United States. Of course, vote for them, vote Biden, vote Harris, you must. However, for a great many people who will vote that way, it is with a clothes pin, or as we say in England, clothes peg, on your nose. Because voting without enthusiasm and integrity, which is a responsible thing to do at a time like this, is also damaging, I've always said, to the soul. But hearing the way Rachel's talking, I think it's damaging to the creativity of the citizen who must do it. Please don't misunderstand me. Vote Biden, vote Harris. However, ask yourself, am I okay with this? Now, many people, especially older Democrats, are okay with it. But I know, because of my connections to young people in America and elsewhere who are critical of support for Israeli policies, that voting for Biden, I can't remember about Harris, voting for Biden is voting for the most pro-Israel politician one could imagine. So do it, but it will damage not only your soul, as I keep mentioning, but will also damage your potential as an artist, which I think is what Rachel is bringing in. Rachel, don't know where you are. Do you want to say anything?
No, thanks. That's good.
Oh, there you are. It's funny. The system is really quite intuitive. If you speak, I see you. So I think it's a really interesting question, and we must find a way to share some of that if we can. This is not a promise, it's a possibility. Loralee, shall we move on to the next person? The speed we're going at, we have enough people already, but we could do with a couple more.
Okay, so let's see, Tara, would you like to unmute now? I know you have a little note on here, may I go toward the end, but I'm looking at the clock. Are you okay with?
I'm okay.
Okay, thank you.
So there's a little bit of I'd like to hear reflection on this because it's a thing that I've been cooking for a while. I'm currently studying depth psychology at Pacifica, but before that I was a doula. And so
you were a what, sorry?
A doula, monitrice.
Oh, a doula. No, a doula as in midwifery and
yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes,
yeah, child
postpartum, yes,
early years. Okay, I know.
And one of the things that sort of prompted me to go into deeper study was watching the intimate and the interface with the world and parenting. And in
Sorry, I'm an old guy and I'm wearing hearing aids. Could you say, and what? What was the word?
And parenting.
Parenting, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not you, by the way, it's me. Yeah.
Sorry. And so one of the things that I observed was that people had ideas of what they would like to do, and I'm polyamorous, so I worked with polyamorous parents as well. And when they got stressed, they reverted to their early attachment styles a lot of the time. So part of my curiosity is what you might think about this, that there's a theory that our attachment styles have been impaired by sort of the Industrial Revolution and the moving of work further out of or away from the home, first for fathers, but then for both fathers and mothers. And that as a result of this, we've sort of lost a lot of parenting wisdom. And so children are more easily overwhelmed, they're less resilient, and they have less time with a stable, single, particular attachment figure. in their birth to age 6 years. And that makes us all a little higher strung, more anxious, and less secure. And that affects our politics and our intimacy. What?
Yes. Wow. I can speak more easily than you may have expected about this. A great deal of my work has been on fathers and mothers, especially fathers. And I can't remember if I've used the term the nurturing dick. Dick is a word for penis. It doesn't literally mean that a penis nurtures. It means that a man with a penis, or a person with a penis, no matter when that penis arrives on their body, by the way, can nurture. And it's not quite the same as the way breasts nurture, but it's connected. So I'm going to come to mothers in a moment. I have had the great privilege of working for very senior American and British politicians, very senior. It's going to be recorded, so I'm not going to say, but if anybody wants to write to me, they can. In the case of one, I was presented with the problem, how can this person running for high office, how can this person become the father of the nation? Now, Americans think the phrase the father of the nation came from Abraham Lincoln. No, it came from the Roman Cicero, but that's the way Americans sometimes go. It was a very powerful phrase. In America, it's a very powerful phrase. It is here too, by the way, but not as much. And the father of the nation was in many respects seen not only as a unifier, but also as a warrior leader. The father of the nation would protect the nation from external threats and internal threats. And also the father of the nation would discipline those who broke the codes, whatever they might be. It is an aggressive model of fathering. And what I did was to pass to these people, these political people, newer ideas, which therapists on this Zoom will probably know about fathers as other than physical disciplinary figures. It's still something that is coming through. And I think it will come through even as we move towards 50-50 male-female participation and leadership in the political process. The model, the ideal, the mythologem of the father is changing in the direction of nurture. If you're a doula and you're polyamorous, you will meet men like this, but they are in a minority. Mm-hmm. Now, with regard to the mother, the work I'm most proudest of in my life outside of the therapy room is working for lone parent family organizations. I'm passionately committed to that. Although, as an aside, but it's not just a lightweight aside, lone parents for the Brits, single parents as we call, which is already a problem, the word single, but lone parents covers that. Lone parents who are female are regarded by the conservative small c elements in Western societies as very problematic people indeed. In fact, you can read clinical case after clinical case where the absence of a father, either in the patient's history or in the patient's present situation, that's to say they're raising children either on their own as a woman or with another woman, it's seen as inevitably psychologically damaging. Now, of course, every time I say this in public, a few people get up and say, I don't think that. Good. But you have to talk generally because it's what the majority thinks. The majority of therapists are deeply prejudiced against lone parenthood. And the reasons they give are that discipline and actually spirituality sometimes are absent. A woman parenting on her own or two women parenting together are regarded as unable to discipline unruly children, male children. Well, of course, it is very difficult to discipline unruly male children. But hey, I had my male children in monogamous contexts, and it was still fucking difficult to discipline them. Talk to anybody living in an ordinary family, boys are revolting. And I mean that in both senses. They revolt. I have developed an idea about the secret hardness of the female body. And we did workshops at Gingerbread. That's the lone parent family organization in London that I've been connected with, gosh, for 30 years, more. We did exercises helping the mothers of unruly boys to harden their bodies. Didn't have to do very much. Look at female athletes, look at female boxers and wrestlers, look at female sports persons of all kinds, or look at how women treat each other. Women can be hard. And the politicians who don't recognize this and castigate those, usually children of color, who don't have fathers, for not having fathers, as if it was their fault, and that all that was needed was to somehow reinsert the father into the family to stop all this rioting. They are, of course, expressing very big collective prejudices, but they are nothing but prejudices. There is nothing wrong with a woman parenting alone or two women parenting alone, and this is not the time to say more than there's nothing wrong with two men parenting alone. Now, therapists, of course, are aware that they shouldn't have prejudices of the kind they do, but they do. So I'm coming to the end of this perhaps overlong answer, but it's overlong because I don't know, you just intuited what I'm into. My muse, the picture I have on, it's downstairs, but the picture I have on where I normally write is of Nicola Adams, the Black British Olympic and world boxing champion at a very light weight. But she's nothing but lightweight, and she's become a tremendously vocal critic of all kinds of matters concerning both women and racial issues. And I mean, I've never met her. She just inspires me. The videos of her just inspires me. So here am I, a man fascinated by a young, small, black tiger of a boxer. So to put it all together, there is something that we as therapists can help onward. And I repeat, there may be many people here saying, oh, I know all that. Do you? Do you really? When you get a new case and there's lots of single parenthood around, don't you think, aha, aha. I mean, I want to show you what I showed Loralee earlier. This is a mug.
You got to move your fingers so we can read it.
Thank you. It says Freudian sips. And on the other side, can you read it?
When you say one thing but mean your mother is on the other side.
Yes, when you say one thing but mean your mother. You've just got to get out of that stupid way of thinking. And actually, it's there in Jungian psychology. It's there in Pat Berry's 1970s paper, What's the Matter with Mother? Mm-hmm. It's there in Jung. Only, of course, what Jung did was to spoil his beautiful thinking by conforming to the culture he was in, sadly. So that's my answer to a question from a polyamorous doula. Okay.
Thank you.
Why did, Tara, why did you want to go towards the end?
Well, sometimes it takes a while for my intuition to fully flesh out what the context of my question is. So it sort of assembles as I go, and I get more detail as I go along.
Okay. I think we probably should close the list now because of the speed we're going. We'll just be able to do Tom, Claudia, and Misha. So let's do Tom.
Okay, so
I can
Tom,
see
can
you down there.
unmute your mic?
I have. Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon, Andrew. I want to bring it to the pandemic and some experiences I've had and others have had. And early in the pandemic, I came across what was a rather, for me anyway, a rather obscure book by Hillman called Pan and the Nightmare. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it.
Of course,
But I started playing with the words pandemic, pan, panic, pandemonium. And I'm thinking about what the goat god in an archetypal mythological sense might be bringing to us right now and the relevance of it contemporarily. But I really want to put that into an experience of kind of depth psychology in the streets kind of thing. And last week I had an experience being out in public at a restaurant. Now you couldn't be in the restaurant, you can only sit outside where I live. And I had a mask on and I'm walking back away from the restaurant and there were a couple of men about my age, white men, who were unmasked while I was masked. And one had a Trump hat on.
One had a what?
A Trump hat, a hat Donald Trump Make America Great Again. You've heard of him, right? Yeah.
I have one of those hats.
Great. I don't. So I'm walking past them and they begin to engage me in conversation, obviously seeing my mask. And quickly the conversation turned to all the conspiracy theories and, you know, the pandemic was a hoax, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we've heard them all. And I stood there about 6 feet from them, listening to them. And they were not, the first thing that drew my attention after the hat were the guns on each of their hips. Glocks. I'm familiar with Glocks. In another previous career before becoming a depth psychologist, I was a homicide investigator. So this conversation, well, this monologue, it wasn't a conversation, ensued, and I stood there for about a half hour, nodding, listening to all the conspiratorial theories. And at one point, I was able to get a question in, and the question I asked was, do either of you have any fear right now? Because there's so much fear going on. And both said no. They knew and these were not, they knew research. These were not, one had been a reporter for 25 years for CBS News. These were not unintelligent men. Fearful, yes, in my opinion. And they both declined to say they had any fear. And then one of them said to me, well, wait a minute. I had a dream this morning. And in the dream, I said, he said, can I tell it to you? And I said, well, if you're comfortable with that, we're out in public at this point. People are coming out of the restaurants, seeing the guns going around us to get to their cars. And in this dream, he starts sharing about, he had a temperature of 105. He was trying to get into work. His boss would not allow him to go to work, come into the office unless his temperature went down to 102. And this went on. He asked me what the dream meant. So I want to just present this in terms of a way, for me, it was just creating some kind of common ground in which psyche came forward. And I'm thinking about the fear with the pandemic at this point and what it's doing to people, and particularly the divides between people at this point. So let me stop there and just maybe get any reactions or thoughts or reflections you might have.
The first thing to do is I'm going to pause for 10 seconds because you have done more than just ask me a question. You've created a thought. Now, what follows is something that many people who hear, sorry, the many people here who are on the IAAP, International Association of Analytical Psychology, analysis and activism list will have heard all this, and so I apologize. The task is to understand such people, and you have understood the task. You haven't made fun of them. You haven't castigated them. The opposite. You offered yourself for a discussion, and when discussion is joined, alchemical dynamics come in and something different comes out. Unfortunately, too many liberals and progressives in the United States have simply opted for satire in relation to the Trump phenomenon. They've abandoned their sense of history. Remember Tricky Dick? Remember all the other sexually out of control presidents? Remember all the other presidents who went to war, which actually this guy hasn't done. So I have been appealing for a more historical approach that understands the problems with American election finance situation, with gerrymandering, with tampering with the vote, with stopping people from voting. I mean, JFK got in because Mayor Daley faked it in Illinois. Don't forget it. So be historical. I'm not saying Trump isn't so bad. He's terrible, okay? But he's a populist, not a fascist, actually, and he's certainly not a Nazi. And he spent a lot of his time knocking around Jews. It's very interesting. Most populists don't. So I think there is a lot of understanding to adopt as an approach. And then, of course, win the election and get the Senate back. Because if all three if all three elements, the House, the Senate, and the White House, are all with the Democrats, well, actually, to tell you the truth, if that happens, we're all in for major disappointment because Biden and Harris will not do what people like me who are very interested in Sanders would like to have seen done. I won't list these things because they're just the standard progressive litany. So I applaud the fact that you listened, that you tried to understand. And I would just ask you, but please keep your response brief because like me, you talk too much. What do you make of the 105 becoming 102, which is still, I don't know how you translate this into centigrade. Mary-Laure, will you just look up, please, what 105 and 102 are? You see, even in Britain, we don't have Fahrenheit now. But if I have a temperature of 102, I feel shitty. If I have a temperature of 105, I could be dead.
Mm-hmm.
If I have a temperature of 105 for more than a little bit, I would be dead, actually. Anyone would. So she's going to tell us at some point. But 102 is apparently okay to go to work. It couldn't be a more perfect critique of capitalism that they don't care if you work with 102 temperature Fahrenheit. And they don't. And they don't care if you have a normal temperature. Actually, they just don't care anyway. Have you got the answer, Mary-Laure?
Yes, I do. 105 Fahrenheit would be 40.55 degrees Celsius.
And 102?
Let me see.
38, 38.89.
So it's fever.
So,
fever.
Tom, Elena, just briefly, what do you make of the fact that it's okay to work with 102?
Well, Andrew, I'll give you, I actually did ask this question of the individual who shared the dream. And I said, well, what does it mean to you? And he said, well, I know enough about biology that if I had 105-degree temperature, I wouldn't be alive. So there was something in his own response that he understood his own, I interpreted to mean his own psychic deadness.
Yes.
102, if he could get down to something, you know, that was just this side of being psychically dead. And I think that's really what happened, because the thing that struck me was the first half hour, there was no vulnerability. Yeah.
Make it very brief, because I'm fucked up on the time.
Yeah. So I'll leave it there.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Andrew. Claudia, can you unmute your mic?
Loralee, can I just ask, can we go on till 5:05? Because then I can give 5 minutes.
Yeah, we'll go a few minutes over to really give these last two individuals time.
Yes, 5 minutes each. Claudia, who are you? Where are you?
Claudia, I'm seeing that you're unmuted, but we're not hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we
Yes,
can.
but quietly. You need to sit closer to your laptop's microphone.
I'm going to bring my mic forward.
That's better.
Is that better? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi. Hi, Andrew. Hi, Loralee. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi. I just would like a comment from any of you about the COVID situation in Brazil, where I come from.
About the what?
About the COVID situation in Brazil.
Oh, thank you.
As you know, Brazil has a population of over 200 million people, and so far we have confirmed cases of over 300 million cases. Brazil is the worst country hit by COVID-19 outside the US. We have confirmed over 100,000 deaths. And as you know, we have also attacks against the environment, the Amazon forest fires. And the next presidential elections will be held in 2022. As someone that grew up under the dictatorship regime in Brazil, I've been very concerned about what's happening over there and the whole state of affairs around the world and how this has impacted psychologically and sociologically on everyone, my family included. I've been thinking a lot about the parallel between the political background and how lockdown can be perceived as oppressive in Brazil, considering our history of dictatorship. And I've been thinking a lot also about the exploration of ideas around force, lack of movement, and religious fundamentalists. So I would like a comment on that. Any kind of comments that will help me untangle this mess.
Thank you particularly, actually. I think you know, I must have lectured in Brazil 15 times.
Yeah, I do know that. I attended some of them when I was a student back in the 80s.
Yeah, well, you're not as old as me. Anyway, basically, I'm not going to answer in terms of the president. And I'm very aware of the racial issues in Brazil, and I'm very aware of the insidious rise of Protestant evangelical sects and churches, but I don't want to go there. Mm-hmm. This might offend Brazilian friends and colleagues, but Brazil is not a developed country. The Brazilians we meet in Europe and America, they are as if citizens of a developed country, and they're nearly all white, or mostly white. Mm. So what's got lost in consideration of the Brazilian catastrophe is, to use the words of our great Jungian colleague, Roberto Gambini, Brazil is underdeveloped. It's not undeveloped, and it's not developed. It's underdeveloped. And by the way, so is Russia, but that's another topic.
Mhm.
This state of underdevelopment could not be worse from the point of view of governmental and state handling of a pandemic. They have the same problem in South Africa too, by the way, that these countries, these underdeveloped countries, are it can be looked at psychologically. They're kind of living a provisionally Western life, but it is only provisional. That's the problem.
Mhm.
And so some of the difficulties with a country like Brazil is that we all expect it to function as a developed country. This, of course, begs the question, does that make America an underdeveloped country? Let's not answer that for the moment. But the answer might be yes.
Yeah.
Or Britain. But that's the kind of thinking that I think is useful in relation to Brazil. The kind of thinking that is not so useful is to tell stories about Bolsonaro. You know,
Yeah.
he is what he is what he is. He got elected like Trump got elected. And by the way, unlike Trump, Bolsonaro had many, many sophisticated intellectual supporters. It wasn't quite like Trump. So it's even worse. It's really worse. And this is what can happen in an underdeveloped country. Forces are unleashed that the structures of the country cannot possibly manage. I'm going to stop because that's enough. Oh, hello? Oh, you've moved, you flipped around.
She's still there.
Sorry.
She's still
Yeah,
there.
she's still there, but I was
I'm right.
talking to her. I was talking to her and she's gone.
I'm right here.
I just wanted to say that I've written in the Political Psyche in 1993 about the economic, even the scientific ingenuity and creativity of the poverty-stricken masses of Brazil who live in favelas, which is not a good word. There are other words, but that's the one everybody knows. And quite honestly, the secret parallel Black economy of the favelas of the great cities of Brazil is absolutely essential to its functioning. And I'm sorry to say that this virus is going to take that out of the picture. I would expect the most massive economic collapse to take place in Brazil. How it will be measured is another story because it's not in the statistics now. So taking it out, it won't show. But this is a real problem. Claudia, where are you? Could you comment on that little speech?
Yes,
There you are.
I'm here. Yes, no, I agree with you in terms of the Brazil being an underdeveloped country and how a crisis like this one has actually shown the lack of structure or infrastructure that we have in the country. The racial divide, yes, has been a massive issue in Brazil for centuries. We are the last country to free the slaves. We had slavery also in Brazil. The favelas, which we now call communities, they were mainly originally populated by the free slaves, and therefore sociologically and politically has also been a target for attacks, for fires, for police invasion. As I'm not sure if you know that, some of you might or some might not, but the police exert very oppressive powers in Brazil. It's a very scary situation over there. I've been thinking a lot about how to use my understanding, my psychological and psychoanalytical understanding to make sense of it all. But in all honesty, personally, I'm scared. It's scary times we're living on.
I agree. Please email me so we can dialogue on email.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you.
But I have one last point about slavery. You know, I spoke earlier that economic inequality is the drumbeat, the bass drumbeat of all much that we talk about. it's true of Brazil, it's true of the United States, it's true the other way around, in a way, in Britain, because of the way that historically the British economy is founded on slavery. But there were no slaves in Britain, actually. Anyway, it's a really, I'm feeling very sad at this dialogue with you. I feel tearful. Because it's a great country, and it isn't just that it's a beautiful country, it's a country pounding with energy and creativity. It's extraordinary. When I do lecture there, the questions from Brazilian colleagues and the public are breathtaking in their audacity sometimes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's do Misha, and we've got less than 5 minutes. Sorry, Misha, who's Misha?
Misha, can you unmute your mic?
Misha.
I thought I did. Yeah, thank you very much for this fascinating, thought-provoking conversations. Very thought-provoking, and my mind always works in so many different directions, but I'll try to make my whatever I say, more or less articulate. Well, I was thinking state, family, well, I'll tell a few words about myself. I grew up in the Soviet Union. I was born in Kazakhstan, and in a very kind of, my mom was an orphan and she was sent there to cultivate virgin lands. So we lived on outskirts of a small town. We were kind of like, almost like untouchable. We had the kids from the town itself were not allowed to play with us. We picked like toys on the garbage, you know, all that. So we lived through this, but, and so I said, family, it takes a village to raise a child. But we survived thanks to our like cooperation, our barracks where we lived. We ran out of oil. My mom tells me, go ask Teta Zina to get the, you know, oil from her. So we would, and this gave me so much power that we can rely on each other. And we are like this, so the family and state. So my question was like, what is a strong state? Growing up in the Soviet Union, well, which also like I have a lot of biases living in the United States for almost 20 years now. But I experienced the United States as like I worked for the Defense Language Institute, taught Russian there. And it was totally like going back to the Soviet Union, bureaucratic, very often dysfunctional. Absolutely, this institute goes on because well, I have my strong opinions. I always got in trouble for that growing up in the Soviet system where I had to give the right answer. But this United States and just like the whole system, like we are talking about Trump or Biden, to me, it wouldn't make a difference. This is the kind of this dysfunctional system that's imposed on everybody. And it's everywhere. At all levels, even psychotherapy, which I did a semester and realized like everybody just teaches you to do a model. You kind of, I want to, my voice is different. I feel like here I have to connect emotionally or that, but it's like, oh, follow this model still. Okay, yeah, it's also Pacifica Graduate Institute, supposed to be like I expected more than, well, and plus financial burden. But what I want to say that like even the presidency, like after Trump became a president, I started questioning like, do we need this father at the top who would you know, make decisions? This is so dysfunctional, and we can get into a huge disaster by letting this one father, you know, rule in the family. Definitely not nurturing. And in these difficult times, it's especially we all come in. It's like economical hardships. We all come to authoritarian. It's all because this is how we can control. But it doesn't. It doesn't help because the USA has so many tendencies to become the USSR. Or whatever, you know, and I see this very clearly. But
yeah, as they say, bring it to an end.
Okay, bring it to an end. And I had a thought, but it flew away. We have to, okay, just about the pandemic. So how it happens? Someone has a model. This model is imposed on everybody. Did anybody talk to these people wearing Trump hat? Let's, as a community, talk about it. What's happening? How it's, no, it's just imposed. Everything is just, and people are copying, just copycats. And this is the problem. Yeah, the monogamy, That's the same system that's dysfunctional, especially in this. We have to have this. And what did you mean by strong state? Anyway, like this is one of the. What
okay,
is
I'm going to stop you. Stop.
Yeah, thanks.
It's really, but being stopped does not
No,
mean what
yeah, I
you're
know.
saying.
I have, as I
It
said.
does not mean what you're saying is unimportant or uninteresting. The opposite. I'd like to rephrase and reformulate what I want to say about the state. I talked about political struggle, and in a way, we're not talking, when we refer to political struggle, about who controls and owns the state. I think we're talking about what kind of state we want to see. You can't take the state out of the equation. The problems are too big. Of course, they will all require local action. This goes without saying. But what kind of state is the question. Your comparison between Soviet Union and Trumpian United States of America brings to my mind. So it's a very important.
Not only Trumpian.
You're making me think, which is really good for me, actually. So it's what kind of state, what is the state in our mind, in our ideals, in our joyous moments, to use the word of Rachel earlier. That's perhaps what I'm getting from what you've been saying. But I think now I hand it over to Loralee.
Well, I want to say thank you to all of you. This has been just a deep, wide-ranging, insightful conversation, and it speaks to the level of engagement of each of you and the times and the seriousness of the times that we're in. And I think the necessity for me of more of this. I know, Andrew, when you brought this up about opening it up to everyone, I think these kinds of conversations, we need to have more of them for a lot of reasons. So thank you for those of you who shared from different countries, different perspectives. Thank you. And I want to say thank you to Andrew, who generously gave his time and made himself and his scholarship and his work available for the Sophia Center and this community. There will be more. There's more to come. So while this is a farewell and a wrapping up for this particular series of conversations, do not lose touch, because there is much more coming. So thank you, thank you. Please stay connected with the Sophia Center. Please stay connected with Andrew. He's put his email out there. So if you don't have that, I will include it in the follow-up to this. So thank you.
I've had about 15 emails actually since this began.
Well, you may want to rethink that at some point, Andrew, but you put that out there.
No, because I type very fast.
Okay. So thank you to each one of you, and thank you to Andrew. And I think for me, this conversation is leaving me with so many, it's making me think, as Andrew was saying too. And I think that is one of the greatest contributions and gifts that we all bring when we make room to listen to each other.
Can I say something?
Yes, you may.
I don't know if Misha is here or not.
He is.
His picture is gone, but he is here.
He's here.
Okay. Sometimes the West projects its shit out. And right now in Britain, our top scientists cannot begin to accept that Russia may have scientific expertise. They just can't cope with it. Who knows whether Sputnik 5, and I was a kid watching Sputnik fly across the skies in 1957. But I think it's a good example of the poverty of thinking in the West, that it simply can't accept that other people in Russia, in China, in Africa particularly, they can think too. Indigenous peoples, whether they are in Amazonia, whether they are in the interior of Australia, whether they are Maori in New Zealand, nobody ever says New Zealand did so well, not only because of having a brilliant female leader, but because the indigenous population has contributed way beyond what you might expect to the discipline that kept New Zealand safe. I've left out other indigenous groups, but I can't list them all. The West is arrogant. It evacuates its shit elsewhere. It punishes other people. Even the revered Barack Obama was responsible for the killing by drone of numerous hundreds, if not thousands, of brown-skinned people in what I call in my old age, Arabia. So where I want to end is on this note, that as Jung wrote, there's something terribly, toxically wrong with Western civilization, and that we have to change if we can.
I think projections are also between the social classes too. You know, like my you know, Barack living, we felt that I was very happy. I had a happy childhood despite everything. Well, we were very close to nature too, and it's like we had a lot of wisdom from all these people. We had to survive, and we were like real. We were very supportive, and we this is the yeah, the projection of the United States, of the West, on the, well, who are terrorists and villains, while they totally, they see themselves in other people. Yeah, it's sad. So
Okay,
it's going to be the same system, the military industrial complex that will need to survive by all means, and dominance and power, and it's going to continue, and I don't think it's going to be any different with the, and Biden especially.
Okay, Misha, yeah. I broke the rules, so
yeah. Okay, thank you.
I'm stopping you too. Loralee?
And I'm letting you get away with it. So Misha, thank you. Andrew, thank you. And leaving it with, I think, the awareness and bringing it home. To what degree, and I'm thinking of Tom's story, to what degree can I withdraw my projections from the other in order to make room and hold space for a conversation and a coming together? And so let's end it on that. And thank you again to all of you, and to Andrew especially. And here's to more of this. So thank you, everyone. Be well. Take care. Bye-bye, all.
Bye-bye.